What is going on, guys? So, as some of you may know, I actually joined a draft league for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. I was kindly invited to join the WBE by A-Drive, and I decided it's been a long time since I've done a draft league, so your boy got a new team, a new logo, and I'm now the Colorado Rapid Spins. So this actually should be pretty fun if you don't know how draft leagues work with Pokemon. Essentially, it works a lot like fantasy sports does. So there are 10 coaches in the league. We each take turns drafting a Pokemon. Once you end up with a team of 10 Pokemon, you have to use that squad for the entire season. You can mix and match per matchup. It makes things really interesting because you know what your opponent has. It kind of makes a pretty interesting mind games, kind of thinking about what they're going to bring. Counter teaming is actually pretty interesting, so I am super excited for this. This league is going to start around the new year, so we've got some time. One thing to note about this is we actually have to catch all of our own Pokemon in this, so there's going to be no genning. Everything is going to be legit, and that's going to make things pretty fun. So in this video, I'm going to be kind of explaining my team, going through what my picks are and why I decided to go with them. Keep in mind, this actually was kind of difficult because there is a limited Pokedex in this game. Things like Mewtwo, Mew, and Melmetal are banned. So there's not a whole lot to choose from, especially when there's 10 teams in this league. So you kind of had to get what you could. I actually was the second draft pick in the league, so I got pretty lucky there in having a pretty solid first pick here. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and show you guys the team. Alright, so since I had the second pick in the draft, I had some free range over kind of what I wanted to go with. The first pick was actually Mega Aerodactyl. I figured it is a great idea to kind of lock down a Mega early, so I decided to go with Mega Gyarados here. It is one of my favorite Megas, and in my opinion, in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, it is one of the better Megas. Mostly because it's pretty damn bulky, and it actually has a unique typing with the Dark type. There's not a whole lot of Dark types, and I figured it'd be pretty nice to lock down the best Dark type, barring Alolan Muck here. So I wanted to go with Mega Gyarados just because this thing hits extremely hard. It's actually very bulky, and there's not a whole lot that can switch into this thing. It's got access to a pretty wide move pool. Unfortunately, it does not get access to Dragon Dance, which would be really nice. Dragon Dance is actually not in this game for some reason, but I decided just to go with Mega Gyarados because it's a good Pokemon to build around. This is gonna, I feel like, be probably the star of the team here. And yeah, so overall, I just really like Mega Gyarados because of its Water Dark Dual Stab, and it is one of the Pokemon that does still benefit from having Mega, just because of the fact that there's not abilities. It doesn't really care about Mold Breaker, but that Dark type is going to really come in handy, and it does have some access to some pretty interesting moves. I can switch things up depending on the matchup here, and overall, it's just pretty much a hard hitter, and it's hard to switch into this thing. So I decided to go with Mega Gyarados as my first pick, and I feel like that's nice because then I can kind of build the team around this thing accordingly. So yeah. Coming in at pick number 2, I decided to go with Machamp. So one thing that I do know about the Let's Go Pikachu Eevee Wi-Fi meta is actually that it's really kind of based around hard hitters. Hyper Offense actually performs really well, so I wanted to kind of get another Pokemon that is hard to switch into, and this is actually one of the highest base attack stats in the game. So I decided to go with Machamp just because this thing is an absolute monster. In my opinion, it is the best fighting type, so I wanted to go with this thing just to try to get this baby early. I had this in my mind the entire time, so I'm really happy with Machamp. It gets access to a lot of cool moves. I believe it gets Elemental Punches. It can also set up with Bulk Up, which makes this thing extremely hard to kill. It's pretty naturally bulky, and again, it's another one of those Pokemon that is really hard to switch into. So it does actually have limited fighting moves in this game, which is kind of unfortunate, but then again, its attack stat is still extremely high, and it's going to be really hard to deal with this thing. So I also figured it pairs well with Mega Gyarados because of the fact that I can switch in Mega Gyarados to resist the Psychic, and I think they have some pretty decent synergy there. So I think Machamp is going to be a great powerhouse to have around, and overall, it's going to be really nice to have this thing building for specific teams. I can run different sets if they're looking like they're going to have a whole lot of physical offense. A bulk up set would work really well. The elemental punches can work great depending on the matchups, and overall I'm pretty happy to have Machamp because in my opinion it is one of the better offensive Pokemon to get early, so I'm happy to have him. So next up, we're continuing the theme of hyper offense, and I decided to go with one of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon, and that is Dragonites. So I decided to mainly just go with this thing because honestly, if the opponent doesn't have a whole lot of ice types, this thing is going to be an absolute pain in the ass to deal with. And the number one best thing about Dragonite is that it is almost impossible to switch in to an Outrage. Outrage hits extremely hard, and Dragonite is going to definitely be a pretty good wall breaker with that. So this thing gets access to moves like Roost. I think that will work pretty well if they don't have a whole lot to deal with this thing. And one of the most common setup moves for Dragonite, unfortunately since it doesn't get access to Dragon Dance, is Agility. So if I can get up one of those, I'll be faster than pretty much anything, and then Outrage is going to absolutely just rip things apart. So I wanted to get Dragonite because it's one of my favorite dragons ever, and like I said, keeping that hyper offense going I think is going to work pretty well for me, and Dragonite does that well because I do have access to moves like Earthquake, Outrage, Superpower. It does get some pretty cool stuff like Waterfall, and I think Dragonite is going to be pretty fun to play with. Next up in the number 4 pick, I decided to go with Alolan Sandslash. So my objective for this pick was to kind of get something that had access to Stealth Rock. It is going to be really nice to have Stealth Rock. If you are not familiar with the metagame in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, there's actually no access to hazard removal other than just taunts, which is pretty much the only hazard removal. So having Stealth Rock is pretty important, and I wanted to try to get a decent rocker early on. So I decided to go with Alolan Sandslash. It is actually one of the rare steel types, so I think that could be pretty nice. It also gets rid of one of the decent ice types, so Dragonite has an easier time with that. And I do like Alolan Sandslash. I think it hits pretty hard, but it's pretty much just here to set up Stealth Rock. It's going to be one of those Pokemon that people are going to kind of be worried about when building for my team. So I think having this thing around is going to be pretty nice for me, and overall I honestly just like Alolan Sandslash. This is going to be a pretty casual league, so we're all kind of just going with Pokemon that we do like to play with. So having Alolan Sandslash should be pretty fun, and I'm interested to see how this thing is going to perform for me. Next up, we've got ourselves the goodest boy, and that is Arcanine. So I was honestly surprised that this thing lasted until round 5. I think it's a really good pick, and as I was kind of just looking through stuff, I figured it would be good to have access to a solid fire type, so that is going to be pretty nice. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't really get access to the best move pool, although it is going to be really nice for Will-O-Wisp. A lot of the teams are going to have some pretty hard-hitting offensive Pokemon, which Arcanine can take at least an attack from and be able to get a Will-O-Wisp up, which I think is super nice. But other than that, it does have a couple options on kind of the way you want to use this thing. So I can either be a special attacker with Fire Blast, Flamethrower, or I could be a physical attacker with like Flare Blitz, and then some pretty solid coverage moves with like Crunch. It does also get Play Rough, so above all, I think Arcanine is just a pretty solid Pokemon, so I'm glad that I was able to get that in my 5th slot. As you can probably imagine at this point, we're getting pretty down to the bottom of the barrel where there's not a whole lot of really good picks left, so I kind of had to work with some things that I think would fit well on the team. So I decided to go with Golem Alola, and the reason for that is essentially just to have another electric resist that's going to help out Gyarados along with Dragonite. So I think Golem Alola works pretty well because it's an alternate Stealth Rocker, and this thing does have a pretty unique typing with the Rock and Electric, so this thing could be pretty fun to use. Unfortunately, it doesn't get its ability, but I think this thing could do pretty well in kind of breaking down teams with Thunder Wave, and yeah. Next up, we've got the Noodle Boy himself, and that is Tangler. So the main reason for this thing was just so that I can kind of annoy teams with Sleep Powder and Leech Seed. So at this point in the draft, I really kind of just wanted to get myself a grass type. So I decided to go with Tangler because I do like Tangler quite a bit. And like I said, he's really kind of only here for just some support with Sleep Powder and Leech Seed. It could be pretty damn annoying and also a little bit hard to kill. So that's Tangler. Next up, as we're getting down to the end here, is going to be my boy Tentacruel. So I think this thing could just be pretty good to have a poison type around. It's something that my team was lacking so far. It does add another water type, but I think this thing could still work well. It's very specially defensive naturally, so it can take some hits, and I do actually like its move pool. That dual stab with water poison is pretty nice there. I can have access to Scald, I can Ice Beam, and a stab Sludge Bomb actually could be pretty nice. So I think Tentacruel was probably just one of the kind of like last things that was decent that was left, so I wanted to pick that thing up just because having a solid poison type can definitely help out. And we are officially down to my last 2 picks, so I really did not have a whole lot to choose from here. There's honestly kind of really the bottom of the barrel, so I decided to go with Raticate, and mostly just because I do like using Raticate. I've used the thing a lot in the past, and it's actually not too bad. It gets access to Swords Dance and Sucker Punch, which I think can definitely catch some things off guard. If I pair this thing with some Sleep Powder action from like Tangler, and then also my next pick, which is Parasect, I think that maybe I can get some stuff going. But overall, just having the priority with Sucker Punch was most of the reason why I decided to go with Raticate. But Joint is back, baby. And finally, up last, we have Parasect. So honestly, nobody really expected anybody to pick Parasect, but I like it. We can have Spore. It's not too bad of a bug type. Unfortunately, it does have an absolute shit ton of weaknesses, but I think that if I get Parasect to work somehow, that could be really nice. I really do like having the guaranteed sleep with Spore. So if I can pair that with the rest of my team, hopefully I can get maybe some sweeps going with that. But overall, Parasect was really just kind of the last thing that was left. So I decided to go with that, and overall I'm actually just happy that my entire team is going to be fully evolved. As we were getting down there, a lot of teams were going with some not fully evolved stuff because they were still pretty decent, but my team is all fully evolved and we're all adults out here. So yeah, Parasect is pretty much just here for Spore support, but it is a bug type. I kind of wanted to get a little bit more diversity on the team, and overall I'm pretty happy with how things turned out, to be honest. I think that my team does have kind of pretty good potential for some good synergy, and it also has some really fun stuff that I'm excited to use. So in the next couple weeks here, I will be going through and kind of trying to get some good IV Pokemon to use for this. I do want to get a couple variants of each one. That would be like a Jolly and an Adamant Dragonite. So trying to get a couple different options for that is going to be pretty nice, knowing what my matchups are and what I need to outspeed. I can kind of hunt accordingly. So I will leave the opponent's teams in the description. You guys can go ahead and check out their draft analysis videos. But yeah, I'm pretty much going to leave you guys with that. Go ahead and leave a comment if you like my team, and if you're excited for this season, because I sure as hell am. See you guys.